Hello, beautiful. I'm your host, Nicole Goff. Welcome to the Ecstatic Life Podcast, the podcast for women who want it all: health, wealth, freedom, authenticity, love, beauty, all of the hidden gems just waiting to be uncovered. This is the podcast for women who are ready to discover their inner creatrix, to discover their inner manifester, and who want to find the ecstatic in every day. Hello, and welcome back to the Ecstatic Life Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Goff, and today I am here with another solo cast, and I want to talk about postpartum, and particularly about slowing down and caring for yourself postpartum. We're diving into a sacred, often overlooked part of our birthing journey. So you guys have probably never heard of this saying, but it goes the first 40 days for the next 40 years. And so what that means is that those first 40 days postpartum, those first 40 days after you have your baby, are extremely critical for your health as a woman for the rest of your life. And that might sound like an exaggeration, especially if this is, an unfamiliar concept to you, but you are in a very critical period of rewiring your brain, literally rewiring your brain during that period. And so it really has an impact on you for the rest of your life. So I am a mother of 5, as you guys probably all know by now. And I super neglected my postpartum for my first 4 births. And I really paid the price for it. And so, yes, take it from someone who did everything wrong until I finally did it right the last time. Postpartum is a super critical period. So I want to talk about, what postpartum can be, how it could look, the best postpartum that you can create, and also how it is mishandled or misunderstood or neglected, and also how you can reclaim this sacred rite of passage for yourself or to support someone else that you love in this time. So what's the problems that I see? The problems, I would say, with the Western postpartum culture. It seems like we have an obsession with birth plans. I mean, pretty much every crunchy mama has an awesome birth plan going into it, but who's talking about postpartum plans? I mean, none of my midwives in all 5 of my births, none of the practitioners or, doulas or anybody that I worked with taught me about having a postpartum plan and how important that was. No one guided me. I mean, I was guided through creating a birth plan. What do I need to have on hand? And, my yeses and my nos, and, what kind of labor support I wanted, what kind of pain management I wanted, all of those things. But nobody taught me how to plan for those first 40 days. I mean, you learn about the first 24 hours. But then, I mean, that first 24 hours, you're still in your post-birth bliss, your post-birth high. You're over the moon that first 24 hours usually. But nobody really talks about after that. The midwife comes back after 24 hours and checks on you, make sure your bleeding is slowing down, make sure everything's looking normal and, checking in with you. But who's there making sure you stay in bed that first 5 days? Nobody's talking about these things. And so, in the West, the norms are 2 weeks maternity leave. If you're a working mama, you might get 2 weeks paid maternity leave or unpaid and be expected to bounce back, be back to work after 2 weeks. even if you're not a working mama, even if you're a homemaker, you're still expected to bounce back. There's this, bounce back pressure. And, I've known, I mean, I was so guilty of this. Like, up that first week, just still doing all the chores, doing the laundry, like, washing my own bloody sheets from the birth and things like that. I mean, I look back on that and it's like, oh, that was so crazy. Like, here I am, like, I should have just been resting, you know? And I'm just up, taking care of other people. Guests are coming by to see the baby, and I'm like feeling like I have to like play hostess and serve them and things like that. And yeah, that's just, it's not good for our bodies. That's our bodies need that time to rest. But, most of us have the supermom syndrome. And, here we are, like we're like, coming in and, taking care of the older kids, taking care of, our in-laws or whatever, whoever's coming over and like taking care of our husbands even. I mean, I was, like resentfully still doing my husband's laundry postpartum, those first, first four births. And, it's like, why was I doing that? Like, why did I, it was this, there was almost like a pride in it. And I think a lot of other women feel that too, like a pride in bouncing back so quickly and being able to like do things right after birth. But it's detrimental. Like it's detrimental to our health. And so, there are consequences. Like I said, I completely neglected that postpartum period with my first, and I, you know, pretty much suffered all of the consequences. But it's like, you know, postpartum depression, not allowing ourselves to rest and integrate is strongly tied to postpartum depression. Pelvic floor issues. So I had pelvic floor prolapse, and again, not resting, not allowing yourself to heal, not staying vertical. Marital dissatisfaction. Like I said, I'm here like up, like resentfully, like doing everything. And that was like enculturated, that was normalized. And I wasn't even like asking my husband to help. Like, I'm sure if I had told him, go do a load of laundry, he would have done it. But it was just this like enculturation of, well, that's my job. I'm the house maker, I'm the homemaker, sorry. And that's my job, right? And, there's also this like deep inner grief over the missed joy, the missed connection. And, I experienced that like looking back, I grieved. I had to grieve when I learned what I had done by ignoring that period of my life, what I had done by ignoring that sacred time, that sacred first 40 days. Like I said, that is when your brain, like your neuroplasticity is just so strong. Like your brain is literally rewiring itself because of going through the birth portal and the hormonal release, the connection with baby. Your brain is so supple. So it's like, what are you wiring it for, right? Stress, pressure, anxiety, postpartum depression, lack of sleep, all these things, high levels of cortisol because of that. So, lots of just stress hormone in the body, it's regulated nervous system. Or as I did for my fifth, bonding and connection and relaxation and healing and nurturance and community and support and love, all these things. So it's you're being hardwired in that first, month and a half. And, I realized, like I said, there was this deep inner grief. I realized that I had hardwired myself for more trauma. So, in a lot of other cultures, and probably most other cultures throughout history, there is a period of rest that is granted to women, that is observed. And some examples. So, in India, they have a 40-day rest, japa. And, this is in these times, women are expected to not work, to not cook and clean. They're brought meals. They're brought, special foods, nourishing foods, warming foods. They're given, belly binding and massage, Ayurvedic massage with hot oil. In China, they have a traditional 30-day period of rest. In Japan, there's a traditionally 100-day rest. And similar, 40 days seems to be kind of the norm. But in Morocco and Korea, they all have this sacred window of time. And rest is a right. It's not a luxury. So in, these traditions, it's seen as something that the mother needs, that then the mother and the baby need. These traditions, they exist for a reason because this is the best thing for the people as a collective, for the family, you know? Because mothers are the threads that tie the family together, that hold the structure of the family together. And if we're not allowing her to get that sacred period of rest, then that has this ripple effect out to the family and to the community. And so mothers are supposed to be supported in that time so that they can be their best when they come out of that period of rest. And, honoring it, it's a rite of passage. This is with every baby, it's another rite of passage into motherhood, into new motherhood, or into your next stage of motherhood, as a mother of 3 or 4 or 5, or, whatever it is, with each reconfiguration of the family system, each new life that is added to that family, there is this period of reconfiguration. And so that 40 days is also to allow time for that reconfiguration to, softly accept this new family member into the tribe, into the community, into the family. And so here in the West, we have it all wrong. We have it all backwards. I, with my third, I went back to work like a week after she was born. And I wanted to. Like, they're like, oh, no, you can take more time off. And I'm like, I wanted to. I stayed at work. I was working at a Waldorf school. I stayed at work until right up till the very end. I was 40 weeks, 41 weeks, maybe even. I was at least 40 weeks. I had her at 42 weeks. And then, I was like, like I took like 2 weeks off, and then I was like right back at it. And, I wanted to go back to work. I didn't want to just like lay around the house. Like I saw that as a weak. And when people say, oh, you look so good, like, oh, you're just bouncing back so quick. Like, I took that as a compliment. Like, I thought that I was doing something right. I was fully in that super mom identity. But little did I know, I was really harming myself and my family. Like, I look back, and in my postpartum depression and, the depleted nature, I got mastitis. I had chronic mastitis with my first 4 postpartums. And if you don't know what mastitis is, it is an infection in the breast, and it is extremely painful. And you generally get fever and chills. Sometimes the fever and chills would last for, like 12 hours. It would be usually like a 24-hour cycle of being down in bed, sometimes longer, sometimes multiple days, where your breasts are super painful and swollen and clogged up, and the milk can't flow out. And it's excruciating. And then you get extremely high fevers, to the point sometimes where I would like hallucinate, where I wasn't able to physically care for my babies because I was so sick. And so that happened a dozen times about each with my first 4 pregnancies or births. And within the first year of each postpartum, I was in the beginning usually about like every 2 to 4 weeks I was getting that. And I mean, it was awful. It was scary too. I would be it was scary for my family because I was so down. I was so down and out. Like, I would look half dead and I just totally couldn't function. But because I was pushing myself so hard, that was my body's way, I believe, of putting me back down. Like, no, you will lie in bed, you will rest. I also suffered with some pretty bad insomnia for a lot of years. And, so I didn't sleep well and my circadian rhythm was all screwed up. And, that really also contributed to ill health. I was suffering a lot, looking back on it, like a lot of ill health. I would get like every cold that came my way. Anytime the kids or anybody around me would get sick, I got it. My immune system was so shot. And, it also affected my mood. And while I've always been like a pretty patient, loving mama, I definitely had mood swings a lot more. You know, I look back on like how much I like cried and broke down during those postpartum periods, like how much like grief and sorrow just was moving through me during those periods. And, it's not surprising because I was lacking the support and lacking the community, lacking the sister circle that I needed around me, the nourishment that I needed. And like I've said before, so, that postpartum period is a time of neuroplasticity. And so, what you feel, what you think, and what you experience during that first 40 days reshapes who you are each time. So, if you can rewire knowing that, and I didn't learn that, like I said, until my last pregnancy. So if you can rewire yourself for love, for joy, for contentment, rather than stress and anxiety and depletion. And I see now, like it has made such a difference. It was with my fifth pregnancy that I finally learned how to care for myself. That's when I dove into self-care as a practice. I mean, it's like it's like religious for me now. It's every day I make sure to care for myself deeply. And that started in that pregnancy and it really was solidified in that postpartum. I got my I got myself a postpartum doula. I got regular postpartum massage, the hot oil, the Ayurvedic hot oil massage. I got someone to help me with housekeeping. I sent my 4 younger kids off to be with grandmas for the first week. You know, I I really I knew that was my last baby, and I knew how important, how critical that period was for rewiring my brain, and so I tried as hard as I could to make up for those other 4 postpartums by just giving myself everything, by pouring everything into myself for that first 6 weeks after that pregnancy. And so, this time I said yes to rest and yes to support and yes to healing and it changed everything. Like it really did. That was truly the beginning of this self-care journey that I've been on for the last 3 years. And it has changed everything for me. I mean, I went from being so sick all the time and, bloated and dark circles under my eyes and just I had a lot of skin problems and just all kinds, just a myriad of different things going on. And I have not gotten sick in a year and a half now. I I lost 10 pounds without doing anything. I feel like in the best health of my life. And that postpartum period, I only got mastitis 2 times. So I didn't completely get rid of it. And those 2 times showed me, that, oh, maybe I was pushing myself too hard. But if you compare that to having a dozen times, like sometimes 2 times back to back in 1 month, like within a couple of weeks during the first, I mean, it was, such a huge difference. And like that right there, like just for that part. But it was also like the emotional side of it, how I felt like I will say it was kind of hard at first to accept the help. There was a part of me that wanted to hold on to the martyrism, that wanted to hold on to being a victim and dropping that martyrdom, dropping that victimhood mentality was not an easy thing. I mean, that really took some mindset work. That really took a lot of manifestation and a lot of prayer and a lot of meditation and a lot of nervous system work. And I had to acclimate around that, and I started small and I built up. But I had to drop that mom guilt. I had to drop that guilt that for for some reason that I carried around for so long, that caring for myself was selfish. That for some reason, doing things for my health and my well-being and my joy and my passions, that was somehow bad, bad for my family, when it's the complete opposite. Like, who wants a wife and a mother who is resentful and depleted and running on fumes and has a nervous system that is completely dysregulated and, sometimes is super, super loving and then sometimes just snaps because they can't handle anything else? I mean, it was, yeah, it was a journey. It was a journey to be able to accept help, to be able to allow other people to come into my house and to take over and to do things, to not be a control freak and be like, well, I can do it better. It took work. It definitely took a mindset shift. That was probably the most difficult thing, the letting go, the releasing it. Yeah. But I do think, like, it's never too late to fix that. So, there might be women who are carrying grief around this, like, well, I'm not going to have any more kids. I'm past the point of getting to redo my postpartum. But it's never too late. So another thing that I did at the end of this postpartum period after my 40 days of rest was I had a closing of the bones ceremony. And this is something that I'm a postpartum doula and I do with my clients now also. It is such a beautiful sacred tradition. It is honoring your body and thanking your body for all of the hard work it did. And it's letting go. Letting go of the traumas, acknowledging and releasing. And it can be profoundly healing at any time. I have heard of women who have done this ceremony years, like 5 years after having their last baby, 10 years after having their last baby. And it was still profoundly impactful that they were able to release the grief or the regret that they had been carrying around for all those years around their births, especially if you had, traumatic births or traumatic postpartums or loss. The closing of the bones, there's the physical aspect of it, but there's an energetic aspect of it that is just so healing. So it's never too late. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, this doesn't apply to me. I mean, it can, and reach out if you want more information about that. So I wanted to give some advice. So I have learned a lot in the trainings, the doula trainings that I have done, and in learning how to nourish myself for my own postpartum. Also for my daughter, I wanted to make sure that she started out on the right foot. She was only 17. I just did an interview with her about her experience becoming a teen mom and the support that I gave her. And so part of that was making sure she had a very nourished postpartum, because I did not want to pass that generational trauma onto her at all. And so I hired the same doula Allison. She's beautiful. She's a wonderful woman. I hired her to care for Ari. She had been the one that cared for me too, and just made sure that, she had so much support and community around her. So it's another aspect I didn't touch on quite so much, but that sister circle, your mamas or your grandmas, your aunties, your best friends, your female community, to have them come around to circle around you and support you with meal trains, with coming over to check in, to help with the other kids, to help around the house like that. I would love to see so much more women coming together and circling around women during that birthing time, during that postpartum period. It's a tradition that has been lost, the mothering the mother. And I would love to see that brought back. So, yeah, so my recommendations. This is the steps that I would take, that I would encourage you to take if you are currently pregnant or becoming pregnant soon. During your pregnancy, make a postpartum plan. So the same way you would make a birth plan, make a postpartum plan. And a postpartum doula or doula can, in general, a birth coach can help you create this. And I'd be happy to help you if that's something you're interested in. You can reach out to me. Aurora Holistic Birth is our doula website. But so, step one is to get your mind right. Like I said, that was the hardest step for me. You have to have this mindset shift. And maybe you're different than me. Maybe you're somebody that doesn't mind accepting support. And if that's so, awesome, amazing. But so many women in our culture have been just entrenched in this idea that we're supposed to carry the weight of the fucking world on our shoulders, that we are supposed to carry everything, literally like the so it's really hard for a lot of women. A lot of women even feel shame around asking for help, like guilt. But I will tell you, it is one of the most beautiful gifts that you can give to someone who loves you, to accept their gift, to accept their support, whatever it is they're offering. So if somebody comes by and they're like, oh my gosh, can I do a load of laundry or dishes? Like, say yes. It is a gift to them to allow them to serve you. I know I never understood that until my last pregnancy. And so, like I said, first is the mindset shift. You are worthy of support. You deserve support. And you need to frame it as a non-negotiable. It is survival, not selfishness. It is what you and your baby need. Embrace doing nothing but bonding, nothing but healing, nothing but resting. That is everything. For those first few weeks, especially. Yes. Number 2, make a plan. So number 1 is get your mindset right. Number 2, create your plan. So make a list of tasks that are going to need to be done. So think about, like, deconstruct what you do, what your jobs are at home. And if have other children already, if this is not your first child, then, what you do with them, what their schedule is, and I mean, everything like dishes and laundry and floors, and when you do these things and how you do these things, like, to get it all down on paper. See if you can break it up into jobs and then think of potential helpers for each of those jobs. So let's say you are like, for me, with baby number 5, I had 4 kids already. My eldest, she was already a teenager, so she could be helpful. But the other 3 were still little. And so that was one of the biggest things I needed to plan around, because they had homeschool co-op and karate, dance, ballet, My eldest, she didn't, I don't think she had her driver's license. No, she did not have her driver's license yet at that point. And so she had to be driven to school. She was in public high school that year. And so I had to figure out, what their schedule was, what was needed to be done with them, and who could do those jobs. And so my husband, with each of our kids, was able to take some time off of work, but as a self-employed carpenter, then, running his own business, he was somewhat flexible, but it's still like, there's no paid leave. So he was limited for the amount of time. So I had to look outside of my home and think about, grandmas and friends. And so doing that while you're pregnant, doing that beforehand, getting it all organized before baby comes, because after baby comes, you're in your like little postpartum bliss bubble. your your brain is just all, mushy, and it's really hard to think and plan. Your head is not in that space. Your head is not in the planning space. So make a plan ahead of time. Write things down, get it all on paper, talk to the people, maybe hire a housekeeper. Even just I hired one for the first month, for the first 4 weeks, I hired a housekeeper. And if you're on a budget and you need to, work within kind of money restrictions, think about like neighborhood kids that could come over and help with things, or does anybody owe you a favor? Mothers, mother-in-laws, aunts, family members, your best friends, and think housekeeping, cooking, childcare, like those are the big ones. So also plan for the 5-5-5 rule. So the 5-5-5 rule is 5 days in the bed, 5 days around the bed, and then 5 days in the house. And so I know in our culture, it is has been normalized to leave the house and take your baby 24 hours after birth to a germy doctor's office. And then again, I don't know. It's like ridiculous. It's like you're supposed to take them in like 4 times their first like month of life or something crazy like that. I don't do that at all. This is not medical advice, and I am not I'm not advising to go against your doctor's wishes. But I did not, after baby number 2, Cora. That was the last time I did any of that, because that is a bunch of bullshit. I mean, you're supposed to get out of bed and drive yourself to the doctor with this teeny tiny little squishy newborn, get dressed, get showered, you're bleeding all over the place. And it's just insane. And then you go to a doctor's office, a pediatrician office, where there's a bunch of germy sick kids. I mean, to me, it's complete insanity. And what do they want to do? They want to break your baby's skin barrier and poke them and take their blood. And no, nope, I don't do any of that. So 5 days in the bed, like literally naked, baby naked or just in a diaper, I would just like put like little cloths under them and just didn't even do diapers, like just skin to skin bonding. You are regulating that baby's bodily functions by touching them skin to skin. So like literally not letting them leave your skin for 5 days. And then 5 days around the bed. So at that point, like, getting up, getting in some movement, doing a little bit more, but still really just staying there in the bedroom, and then 5 days in the house. So that's 15 days total of not leaving the house. And, that second week, getting more movement, doing more. You don't want to restrict yourself from movement too much, because movement is healing. It gets blood flowing and healing. But you want to be very careful not to do too much. And if you watch your bleeding, your body will tell you when you're doing too much. If you start bleeding extra, if you start gushing, lay back down. That's your body telling you you're doing too much. So yeah, that 5-5-5 rule is very important. So that first 5 days, like, get up to go to the bathroom if you need to. But besides that, like horizontal, lay in with your baby, having people bring you food, bring you drinks, don't be scared to be waited on. Like that is what you need in that time period. And so another part about planning is to make sure you prep with supplies. So peri bottles, sitz baths, a bunch of clean, comfy sheets and blankets. Hydration is another big one. So I bought a whole bunch of coconut, like a huge Costco case of coconut water to have by the bed. So prepping all these supplies for postpartum and then having them right there on hand. Like I created a cabinet next to my bed. So, my Chucks pads and everything I would need were just right there. Big old pile of clean diapers, anything, blankies, whatever, all boom, right there next to the bed in this cabinet. So that was my postpartum station so that I didn't have to get up and find something, so I didn't have to worry about it. It was all ready to go. So step number 3 is to get support early. Plan for support before the baby. So like I said, in the lists section, in your planning section, delegate early. So find the people and contact them and get the commitment and assign people specific roles. Like, your mother-in-law, my mother-in-law took my little ones for a vacation the first week. And that was amazing. Like she whisked them all away for a vacation the first week. So when I was in that period of just laying in bed, somebody else was caring for them, and that was amazing. So and after that I had my mom and my eldest daughter and some friends that were in charge of childcare, getting my kids back and forth to homeschool co-op and things like that. Assign people grocery runs. If you're not leaving the house for the first 15 days, you're going to probably need somebody to go to the grocery store a couple of times. Another one is the meal train. Dedicate someone to organizing a meal train. Mealtrain.com is really awesome. Meal trains are so important, I feel like, for postpartum. And, part of this support is talking with your partner, getting your partner on board. So helping him to understand how important this is, because men aren't wired to understand this. Men, and that's part of the problem. I think that's why these traditions have been lost. Our society's been so patriarchal, and we have lost the information that was once just so intrinsic. And so husbands, boyfriends, whatever, aren't wired for this, to understand this, to know that this is a sacred time of your life and your family's lives. And so they aren't going to necessarily just be there for you. Some husbands are great about this, but many of them don't understand this. And so have conversations, prep them for what their role needs to be. Let them know that you need them. Let them know how much they are needed. Another thing you might want to consider is investing in a postpartum doula. Like I said before, a house cleaner, maybe a babysitter for the kids. Like I said, maybe there's like a neighbor kid that can come babysit or something like that. But paying for these things, if you have the extra funds, it is so worth it. Let me tell you, the money I invested, it's like that, whatever, couple $1,000 I invested in my postpartum care. So worth it. To not have mastitis a dozen times, right there, boom. And the massage, oof, I definitely recommend the postpartum massage. That was heavenly, heavenly. So the next tip I have for you is to remember to nourish your body. So think warm, hearty, nutrient-dense meals and plan ahead. So freezer meals, most people know about that. There's something that's kind of a new trend. It's called nesting parties. So during your pregnancy, you have a party with your friends and you make a bunch of food to put in the freezer. And I think that's a really, really fun idea. Um, yeah, I did not do one. I didn't know about that until I was taking my doula training courses after I had my 5th baby. And so when I learned about that, I was like, "Oh man, I missed out on that." But now I always recommend that to my clients and to my friends. avoid junk food. It's very important to avoid the nasty stuff. Your body needs to rebuild. And so it's really important to stay away from junk food during this period of time. Hydration is super key. Make sure you're staying hydrated, and keeping, healthy snacks within reach. Maybe some like nuts and berries, a trail mix kind of thing, or something like that you can have close to your bed, just right next to your bed, that you can just easily grab and snack on, so you don't have to always rely on like calling to somebody to go like get you something. But what is truly best is those warm, nourishing, hearty, like think like stews, curries, that kind of stuff. The warming foods are so good for you. And if you have never heard of this, you may consider placenta smoothie. So that's something I have done with three of my three home births. I had my placenta within the first 24 hours postpartum. Part of it added into a berry smoothie each time, and consuming your placenta right after birth can help with your healing, can help with your balancing your hormones, can help with your uterus contracting back down to stop bleeding, and lots of things. Me and my husband joked that he was going to make sushi out of my placenta for me. He never actually did it, but that would have been kind of funny. that that might be a thing. I don't know. So, number 5, care for your womb and your breasts. So, these are sacred body parts that have been through a lot. That the massive amount, I mean, that's an understatement. The massive amount of change that your womb and your breasts go through between the time of conception and having a baby. When your milk comes in and your boobs are just giant footballs or watermelons or whatever, and they're hard and veiny and hot, and yeah, you know what is going on with your lady parts. It's a bit of a hot mess. So honor them. Make sure you're all stocked up on any sorts of healing ointments, sitz baths, herbal elixirs for your peri bottle for healing. There's all kinds of good nursing pads, silver cups, gel pads. There's all kinds of stuff on the market now. And so, yeah, be ready to care for your body and to, care for your lady parts. I recommend having a list at the ready for a lactation consultant and an acupuncturist and a chiropractor, and your midwife or your doula also can, be a real big support in that. So if you're having anything that feels off, or, have a list of people on hand that you can turn to. Another thing is to consider indulging in some body loving rituals like belly binding and yoni steaming and womb massage or moxibustion. These things I all did after my 5th baby, and they were just so yummy and so healing. So if you're looking for these kinds of extra treats, a postpartum doula can put you in the right direction with any of these extras. And so, just in closing, I would like to mention the ripple effect that this has. So this sacred window ripples into your future. So if you choose to honor it, it ripples into your future one way or the other, actually. But whether it ripples out into your future and into your family with the feelings of love and nurturance and community and support, or whether it does with grief and regret and the feeling of the weight on your world. It's your choice. Choose to honor it choose to respect it. Choose to move into it with courage and with grace and with a plan and with the ability to accept support. And that's monumental. It's monumental. So I really encourage you to share this podcast with any mamas to be that you know. And actually, just share it far and wide because more people should be talking about this. This should be more in the zeitgeist. We need to be supporting moms post birth. This should be normalized. This should be the norm, just what we do. You don't have to earn rest. You are worthy of it. You need it. This should be totally normalized. So if you're in the North Central Florida area, me and my eldest daughter have Aurora Holistic Birth, which is our doula business that we do together. I would be super honored to be able to support you in person or worldwide. I am available to help with pregnancy, birth, and postpartum coaching online via Zoom. And I can help you with your birth plan and your postpartum plan. Let's get that out into the zeitgeist too. Postpartum plan. And I would be honored to support you on that journey. So you can find me at auroraholisticbirth.com or NicoleGoffSpeaks.com or Nicole Desiree Goff on Instagram. Until next time.